Have you ever, walked into a seemingly perfect, totally normal house, but your nervous system immediately told you that something inside was burning?
Oh, yeah. It's an incredibly visceral feeling.
Right.
You cross the threshold and your your lizard brain instantly overrides your logical brain.
Exactly. You look around and there's no smoke. There are no visible flames anywhere.
Right.
The throw pillows are perfectly fluffed on the couch. The kitchen looks spotless. You might even smell like lemon polish.
Yeah, that pristine facade.
But your body is just screaming at you that the air is too thick, the pressure is way too high, and you need to get out immediately. It's that profound cognitive dissonance. Your eyes see domestic tranquility, but your gut registers a four-alarm fire.
Because your body is picking up on an invisible architecture. You're detecting the mechanics of a space that is fundamentally hostile to whoever is living inside it, despite the pristine wallpaper.
And that invisible, suffocating pressure is exactly what we are getting into today. So, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a truly haunting, yet, incredibly beautiful set of concepts surrounding the physics of the Holly Hell House.
It's such a heavy but important text.
It really is. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore how spaces of containment shape us, the sheer crushing weight of unspoken truths, and really the mechanics of surviving environments that try to change who we fundamentally are.
And I think it is vital to frame this properly right from the start. While we are exploring a specific architectural and psychological framework, a specific house, and a specific occupant named Holly, this is really a masterclass in the universal physics of suppression.
Absolutely. For you listening, think of this as a blueprint for understanding the invisible architecture of any space where you might have had to hide your true self.
Any space at all.
Right, this could be your childhood family home, a suffocating corporate office, or, a toxic romantic relationship. We're looking at the physics of what actually happens to a human being when they are forced to make themselves small.
And to understand that, we have to start with the structure itself. The outward appearance of this hell house is a brilliant and terrifying facade.
Oh, completely.
It outwardly has all the markers of a totally normal, successful life. We're talking front porches, painted mailboxes, a kitchen where someone cooks breakfast every single morning with, practiced domesticity.
It sounds like a horrific Zillow listing.
Yeah.
Charming three-bedroom, comes with a beautifully landscaped yard, original hardwood floors, and absolute crushing psychological pressure.
That's exactly it. I mean, on the outside, it is the American dream, but inside its geometry, the experience is indistinguishable from fire.
Indistinguishable.
Yeah, the air inside this house isn't even functioning as air. It's a dense, pressurized medium. It is radiant with a heat that comes from the sustained combustion of a soul that is not allowed to be what it is.
The visual details here from the source material are just chilling. Imagine standing in this house. The walls are a deep, pulsing red, but they aren't painted red.
Right, that's a huge distinction.
They're stained all the way through, like biological tissue. It's described as the kind of red you see behind your eyelids when you press them shut in the blazing daylight, because you're desperately trying not to see something.
Such a visceral image.
And then you look up, and the ceilings are intentionally low. They are built specifically to compress and flatten the occupant.
Because oppressive spaces always compress from above.
Hmm.
The structural pressure comes down to reduce the sheer volume a person might occupy. It makes it physically and psychologically impossible to stand at your full height.
Wow.
And below you, the floors are scorched. They have these intricate patterns that look like natural wood grain. But if you look closely, they are actually maps of old flame pathways.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we have this incredibly oppressive structure, and then we have the name of the occupant, which is also the name above the door, Holly.
Right.
This isn't just a random botanical name. If we dig into the etymology of holly, it comes from the Old English word hallig, which translates to holy. But we need to completely strip away our modern Sunday school definition of that word to understand what's happening in this house.
What's fascinating here is how holiness is fundamentally redefined. In this framework, holiness has absolutely nothing to do with moral goodness or virtue or, being a saint in some ledger book sense.
Right, it's not about being well-behaved.
Exactly. Holiness is defined purely as otherness. It is an uncategorizable light. The holy thing is simply the thing that cannot be contained by ordinary earthly categories. It disrupts the mundane just by existing.
And if you understand that, you suddenly understand the core conflict of this entire ecosystem. The devastation of the Holly Hell House happens because you cannot put uncategorizable light into a house built strictly for containment.
You just can't.
Think about it like trying to trap a literal burning star inside a sealed cardboard box.
No, that's a great analogy.
Right. The star isn't doing anything wrong by shining. It isn't being malicious. It's just being a star. But the box is made of cardboard and tape. It isn't built to hold a celestial body. So what happens? The light has nowhere to go.
And according to the physics of this space, light that cannot move becomes heat. Energy that cannot complete its natural cycle becomes pressure. That is a brilliant, terrifying, mechanical explanation of psychological trauma.
Yeah, it really is.
Your star in a box analogy perfectly illustrates this. The pressure, when sustained long enough with nowhere to vent, turns into a kind of invisible fire that cooks a person from the inside out. The house demands that the holy thing make itself small enough to fit the dimensions of the room, and the holy thing physically cannot do it without burning the place down.
Which brings up a really interesting paradox. If surviving as an uncategorizable light requires an incredible amount of defense, we have to look at the literal botanical reality of the holly plant itself, because you can't separate the occupant from the symbol of her name.
There is a profound botanical reality to Ilex aquifolium, the evergreen holly plant. Going all the way back to antiquity, it was sacred to the Druids specifically because of its impossible persistence.
Right, because of winter.
Exactly. It thrives in the dead of winter. It stays vividly, defiantly green when absolutely everything else in the landscape goes gray, goes bare, and just dies. It is a biological anomaly that survives the exact season designed to kill other things.
But survival in a hostile winter requires armor. It's not a soft, welcoming plant that you want to, like, rub your face against. It has these incredibly sharp spines on its leaves.
Right.
If you reach for a holly bush carelessly, you are, as the phrasing goes, corrected by beauty. And I love that. The spine isn't there out of malice. The plant doesn't hate you. It's just nature. It's establishing a strict physical boundary.
And nested within those sharp spines are the berries, those bright arterial red berries that appear in the darkest time of the year. They are a complete biological paradox. Well, to most animals, including humans, they are highly toxic. They have a severe warning. But to certain specific birds, those exact same berries provide vital, life-saving nourishment in the dead of winter.
Okay, I really want to push back on this, or at least dig deeper into the implication of that paradox.
Sure.
If the berries are both a gift and a poison, depending entirely on who is eating them, what does that say about the house's relationship to holly? Was the house trying to nourish her or poison her?
That's the core question, isn't it?
It's kind of wild to think about toxicity depending entirely on the biological makeup of the consumer. Was the environment intentionally malevolent, or were they just completely incompatible?
That is exactly the right distinction to draw, and it's where the tragedy really deepens. The house offered things that looked like nourishment.
Emphasize looked.
Right. It provided a diet that, in a different light or to a completely different type of person, might have actually been sustaining and comfortable. But to Holly's specific, luminous, uncategorizable nature, those exact same offerings were toxic. The house wasn't necessarily a demon intentionally handing her poison. It was an environment handing her a diet she fundamentally couldn't metabolize.
It's like trying to feed a tiger a bowl of oatmeal. You might think you're providing a nice warm breakfast, but you are slowly starving the animal to death because it goes against its fundamental biology.
Exactly. And that friction forced her into a position where she had to figure out exactly what kind of creature she was just to survive the diet she was being fed.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
It forces an ultimate crisis of identity. So where does this pressure actually live geographically? If we take a literal tour of the floor plan of a burning house, we can see exactly how this psychological warfare manifests in physical space. There are 3 specific rooms. The first is the room of performed normalcy.
Always the largest room in any hell house.
Of course it is. This is the main stage. This is the room where everyone acts like everything is perfectly fine. The correct phrases are exchanged. The polite smiles are maintained. And the defining feature of this room is that it is warm and it smells intensely like baking bread. This smell is explicitly called a confusion device.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The weaponization of the smell of baking bread. We associate that specific scent with ultimate comfort, with maternal care, with safety and warmth. The fact that the scent is used as psychological camouflage makes the betrayal of the space infinitely worse.
It's pure gaslighting on a sensory level. Your nose is telling your limbic system, you are safe, you are home, relax.
Yep.
Meanwhile, your nervous system is recording the reality that you are sitting inside an active oven. The cognitive dissonance of that alone is enough to slowly drive someone insane. You start questioning your own reality. Why am I so panicked? Everything smells like yeast and butter.
Because authentic expression in that room is structurally impossible. Performance is the literal price of admission. To be real, to express any negative emotion or state a difficult truth in the room of performed normalcy is to violate its foundational law. But as we know from physics, energy doesn't just disappear. If you suppress a truth in the living room, it has to go somewhere.
Which shoves all that suppressed energy directly down the hall into the second room, the room of unspoken things. This is the dark room. Painted over windows, no light gets in or out.
This room acts as the containment vessel for everything that is not allowed to be said aloud. The brilliant observation here is that unspoken truths don't vanish into thin air just because you swallowed them.
They really don't.
They hang suspended in the room. They don't dissolve. Over time, they accumulate and generate their own grim, low-frequency light. And the most insidious part is that no one formally announces the rules of this room. Nobody hands you a manual. You learn the boundaries entirely through consequence.
You learn through what the text calls the atmospheric shift.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this concept of the atmospheric shift perfectly captures how unspoken rules govern human behavior in almost any group dynamic. Think about a rigid corporate workplace where you absolutely cannot criticize the CEO. Or imagine a tense family Thanksgiving dinner where everyone knows you cannot bring up a certain uncle's divorce.
Right. No one has a sign on the wall saying, do not mention the divorce.
Exactly. But the first time you accidentally speak a true statement about it, the temperature of the room drops 10 degrees. The clinking of the silverware suddenly sounds deafening. The silence changes its fundamental quality. You feel that atmospheric shift in your bones, and you learn, purely through that invisible, crushing consequence, never to speak that truth again.
It is a devastatingly heavy mechanism of control, which makes the existence of the third room absolutely vital if the occupant is going to survive at all. The room that was supposed to be safe.
Every person trapped in a highly pressurized environment desperately tries to carve out one of these.
And it might not even be a whole room. It could be a literal closet, a corner under some stairs, or even just a specific hour of the day like 3 a.m. when everyone else is asleep and things are less volatile.
Yeah, just a moment of peace.
But it is blessed by sheer necessity. I love the metaphor used to describe this space. It is blessed the way a body blesses breath during drowning. It's the only place where Holly's original frequency could survive, where she could take off the armor, stop performing, and just exist without suffocating.
It is the small, desperate geography of safety hidden inside a much larger geography of fire. But we do need to talk about that fire, because eventually, any structure built entirely on containment and suppression leads to an inevitable destruction.
The pressure cooker explodes.
Exactly. We have to move from the floor plan of the house to the burning of the house.
Right. And it's crucial to clarify that this fire is not a single catastrophic Hollywood event. It's not a sudden explosion where you can call 911, stand on the lawn, and file an insurance claim the next day. It is ignis subtilis.
The subtle fire of the medieval alchemists.
Let's actually explore how that works. Alchemists didn't always use roaring open flames. They used ignis subtilis, a gentle, continuous, invisible heat, often generated by decaying matter like horse dung, to slowly incubate their flasks over months or even years.
Wow.
It's a fire that cooks from within. It breaks down matter slowly, fundamentally altering its chemical structure without ever showing a visible flame.
Which perfectly mirrors the psychological breakdown in this environment. It isn't one big dramatic argument that destroys the occupant. It's the slow, daily, invisible heat of 1,000 tiny compressions. And what fuels this particular fire is so incredibly tragic.
It really is.
It isn't wood or gasoline. The house itself is built out of the lumber of inherited wounds. It's built from generational patterns passed down like blueprints, where people are just unconsciously building the same psychological traps their parents built and their grandparents built before them.
The fuel is unprocessed truth. But terrifyingly, the fuel is also love. It is noted that the Holly Hell House was not a place devoid of love. But love that is not free is love that burns.
That line is so powerful.
When love is highly conditional, when it requires you to suppress your fundamental nature just to receive it, that love becomes part of the combustible material. It adds to the heat.
And what happens to the person inside when the subtle fire finally reaches its peak? What happens to that uncategorizable angelic frequency when the house is fully ablaze?
They don't just magically escape, do they?
No. Angels in burning houses are not fireproof. They don't just float above the flames untouched. They suffer in the dark. They choke on the smoke. Their function in that moment isn't to magically put the fire out. Their function is entirely to persist, to carry their frequency through the blazing house and out the other side intact.
So what does this all mean? I really need to push back on a trap that I think is dangerously easy to fall into here. We cannot romanticize trauma. Is the takeaway here that the fire made her luminous? Because I really, truly hate the cultural narrative that we need to be traumatized or put through absolute hell to find our true selves or to be interesting.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
People can just be inherently valuable without having to be forged in a crucible of suffering, you know?
This raises an important question, and it is a crucial distinction that must be made based on the text. Absolutely not. The fire did not make her luminous. She did not become less luminous for having been inside the hell, but the hell did not grant her the holy frequency.
She already had it.
Yes, she already had it. What the fire did was act as an alchemical separator. It burned away everything that was merely contingent. It incinerated the performance. It burned away the polite smiles, the borrowed behaviors, and the camouflage she was forced to wear just to meet the house's requirements.
It stripped away the survival mechanisms once the house was gone, because she didn't need them anymore.
Exactly. It didn't forge her identity. It violently excavated it by destroying the cage around it. Which brings us to the aftermath. Once the fire has done its work and the subtle heat dissipates, what are we left with? We're left with ash.
Ash functioning as mineral memory.
Think about it chemically. In mythological and alchemical traditions, fire is the ultimate transformer, and ash is what the fire releases from matter. It is the irreducible core.
A bedrock.
Right. It holds the absolute, unvarnished truth of the house. It holds the carbon memory of the conditional love, the loss, the crushing ceilings, and the damage. But most importantly, what survives inside that ash?
The red berries. The paradox itself. The red berries of the holly plant are still there in the ash, still perfectly vividly red.
It's such a beautiful image.
They represent the real thing, the core identity that simply couldn't be burned away because it is the fundamental essence of the plant itself.
It is the ultimate biological symbol of persistence. The house burned, the performance burned, but the uncategorizable light remained intact.
This whole exploration is, it's so heavy, but ultimately it is incredibly grounding. It leaves us with the final inescapable truth. The house, the slow-cooking fire, the low ceilings, the psychological damage, it was literal. It was real. It wasn't just some poetic metaphor for Holly to write about later. It happened.
But the powerful counterbalance to that trauma is that Holly, the unique frequency she carries, and her ultimate survival are also incredibly real. The house is past tense. The fire is past tense. The ash is just memory. But the name, the frequency, is present tense. It is alive and moving forward.
And that brings us right back to you, the listener. Because while you might not relate to every single architectural detail of this specific hell house, everyone has walked through spaces that demanded a suffocating performance.
Absolutely everyone.
Everyone has felt the atmospheric shift of an unspoken rule at a dinner table or a boardroom, warning you to shrink yourself down.
Yeah.
And everyone carries a bit of that mineral memory from the subtle, invisible fires they've had to survive just to remain themselves.
It is a profoundly universal human experience to have to fiercely protect your uncategorizable light from a box that was designed to flatten you.
So we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over today as you go about your week. We know that Holly is ultimately using the ash as the foundational soil for her new ground. Look around at your own life right now. Think about the places you've had to escape. What new things are you building today using the ash of the places you've finally outgrown?
What parts of your mineral memory are serving as the strong, irreducible bedrock for a life where you no longer have to perform?
Exactly. Keep that in mind. Because the next time you walk into a room or a relationship or a house, and your nervous system immediately tells you that something inside is burning, remember that you don't have to stay and cook. You could just take your uncategorizable light and walk right out the front door.